Once again, we are back with the executive series, and today we are chatting to Mziwodumo Rubushe. He's the Ombudsman at the Competition Commission. He deals with issues related to employees, welfare of employees, and other related, labor-related issues, but also, as I said earlier, issues that have to do with the welfare of employees. He's going to talk to us about values. He's going to talk to us about the culture of the organization. Those things are key in terms of how we conduct ourselves in the commission, but also how those inform how we do our work and how we achieve the kind of results that we achieve as an institution of excellence. Pramzi, thank you for agreeing to come and chat to us. We continue with the series. It's an executive series focusing on the 25th anniversary of the Commission. You have been here for a very long time, and I think you have been interacting over the last few years with the staff on issues of wellness, but particularly on issues of culture, values, and how the staff's morale, one, is kept well, but also is kept high in terms of what the organization demands and what are the demands of the work that the workforce does. But I think I would want you to take us through in terms of what has been the significance of organizational culture in the work that the organization has been doing, particularly the output, but also in shaping the commission generally and up to now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ngoma. I mean, the Competition Commission, I mean, as you are aware, is one of the most cutting-edge specialized organizations, you know. It's one of the most top-performing, I mean, government agencies, highly respected, I mean, both in South Africa and abroad. And that is because, I mean, the Commission's emphasis on excellence. That is because of the Commission's, total commitment, to making sure that we promote in South Africa, I mean, competitive markets, making sure that our SMEs, I mean, have access and participate in the economy, and we eliminate barriers to entry, and also make sure that historically disadvantaged persons also have access into the economy. But the downside to it is, I mean, to that excellence is that over the years, the Commission has, in a sense, through its focus, I mean, to that excellence, neglected. Did not put a similar emphasis on the well-being and on the organizational culture of the organization as such. And as a result, of that, we have then as an organization noticed over the years, issues then related, I mean, to burnout, emerging within the organization. And therefore the question then was asked, on the way, that yes, we are an excellent organization, high-performing organization, but at what cost, to the well-being of employees? It is those questions then that resulted in the organization then changing tack. I mean, with the objective then of balancing that output, that is celebrated, I mean, both here and abroad, but balancing it with the well-being of the organization. That then culminated then in the Commission drafting and crafting, I mean, its values around 2017, and those values were abbreviated as COMPETE, interestingly, that COMPETE, I mean, standing for communication, ownership, making a difference, professionalism, employee welfare, as well as teamwork and efficiency, Those values then, they were launched officially by the Commission. And then steps then were taken to make sure that these values are actually then embedded within the organization. And those actions that were taken, I mean, they were taken in the form of, I mean, training of staff. I mean, our staff was trained, I mean, on these values. We launched, I mean, campaigns of popularizing, I mean, these values, I mean, within the organization to make sure that they are actually lived. So what then, I mean, we plan to do is to actually to continue on this trajectory and make sure that we have a culture that supports our new organizational strategy. That is our 2025 to 2030 strategy. This is important. I mean, for us as an organization to make sure that we don't, in the process of emphasizing a lot of excellence on outputs, and never again, I mean, do we then neglect the well-being and the welfare, I mean, of our staff. I mean, why does communication, I mean, matter, you know, in terms of these values? I mean, communication is very, very important because it enables us, I mean, to be a transparent organization in that we are able to communicate, I mean, the decisions of the organization from ExCo level down, I mean, to our staff. How do we then benefit from that? We benefit in the sense that we are able then at team level, at divisional level, able to make much more informed decisions, you know, because of that transparency and because of that communication. I mean, with regards to then, I mean, the issue of, I mean, the value of ownership, for example, why is it important? I mean, ownership is very important because it actually instills on the part of employees, you know, a sense of ownership, a sense of accountability, a sense of responsibility for, I mean, the work that, I mean, our employees basically are doing, whether it's casework, investigation, or it's matter control, or it's even advocacy work. You know, when it comes to employee then welfare, I mean, why does it matter? The Commission has a responsibility to make sure that it creates an enabling environment, you know, for its staff to be able to perform. I mean, this year we're talking about, I mean, the work-life balance, for an example. I mean, balancing work as well as our personal lives as employees of the Commission. I mean, this talks to issues like, I mean, making sure that our employees, you know, whilst they are, I mean, doing their work, we respect their private space, you know. We respect their family time, you know, we do not intrude in that space. And we have done this through policy interventions, I mean, as well, to make sure that, I mean, that space is actually then respected as well. I mean, teamwork itself, I mean, what then it engenders in the organization, it engenders a spirit of collaboration. It eliminates, you know, the silo mentality. And it also enables our employees, I mean, to be part of decision making, you know. Why does that matter in the organization? Because at the Commission, we work with cross-divisional teams, meaning therefore that we do not work in terms of divisions, but we basically work as teams, and those teams, we refer to them as cross-divisional teams. So if it's an investigation, for instance, you will have lawyers, you will have economists giving a legal analysis, and you have economists then that will give you your competition analysis in a case, you know, whether it's a merger, whether, I mean, it's an investigative case. So that then gives a balanced then view, you know, of that particular case, of that particular measure, such that then, as we then make the necessary recommendations, I mean, to our ExCo, to the tribunal, those reports that we are writing, they are sound from both from a competition as well as economic analysis point of view, and therefore enhances the chances, basically, of our successful prosecution or an approval of a measure. I mean, whatever then the case may be between those two. So that's why these values are so therefore important, and that's how basically they relate to basically the work that we do. Now, why does I mean the role of leadership matter? It is very, very important for leadership because leadership are the drivers basically of culture in an organization. How then leadership, I mean, behaves, how then leadership role models the values, you know, it is going to cascade and influence the behavior of their teams. it is very, very important, therefore, for the leaders themselves to be exemplary in their contact, to provide clarity on culture and these values themselves. They also have a responsibility of peer, doing peer reviews, on these values as well. They also have a responsibility of coaching, their teams on these values. They also have a responsibility also of celebrating those that embody and live these values. So that's where leadership plays a very critical role when it comes to.
Starts at the top.
Because it starts at the top. Yes, the message must start from the top, because of the position, obviously, that leadership occupies in the organization, and how their conduct and behavior then influences then everybody else below in the organization. So that's how then in a nutshell, Mr. Ngwema, that these values, why they matter, and then how they relate then to the work basically that we do, and why the role of leadership basically then matters.
And then I think critical to the work of the Commission, and the fact that we have pointed out that you are a center of excellence, and there's confidence that we have then earned, and respect we have earned in terms of the public and the stakeholders that we serve. But to what extent are the values of trust and credibility, do they underline the compete values that you spoke about? Transparency, trust, and accountability. What role do those play in the nature of our work, but also in the conduct of our employees generally?
Yeah, thanks, Luzangam. That's a very important question that you are asking. Because these values, they talk to our legitimacy as an organization. Because given the nature, of the work, that we do, the credibility of the Commission is extremely important, Mr. Ngoma. We work with external stakeholders. We work with big business, for an example. We work with labor. It is very, very important that at all times, as the organization, we are seen, by these stakeholders as a credible organization, that the decisions that we make are taken independently, based on the evidence placed before us, and not by any other factors. It is very important, therefore, from a legitimacy point of view, because we receive information, for an example, from matching parties. And these matching parties, then, Mr. Ngoma, must be certain that the information that they provide, for an example, to the Commission, where in terms of confidentiality provisions, it will be respected. Labor, for an example, must be confident that their right to participate, for instance, in measures will be respected, by the Commission, and therefore the necessary conditions will be created, like training them in terms of how to participate. These measures is actually will be respected and implemented. It's very important also from a consumer point of view, Mr. Ngom, because we, as an organization, in terms of complaints, we receive complaints, from external parties, from business, in some instances, which includes, consumers. The credibility issue, again, there is very, very important, Mr. Ngoma, in the sense that our consumers must be certain, that the information that they provide to us as an organization, in order for us to prosecute anti-competitive conduct, will be treated with utmost confidentiality, and therefore their privacy also, would be protected. However, the competition issue that they will be raising from time to time, actually, they must be certain that the Commission will actually address that issue within, of course, its scope of authority as provided by the.
And then earlier you said, therefore, you want to have champions people that are going to champion this cause in terms of our culture, but also in terms of our values. How are you going to choose these champions? What traits are you looking for? And what kind of task lies ahead in terms of what they must do?
Yeah, with regards to these champions, firstly, I mean, we want actually these champions to be the leadership of the organization. We do not want it to cascade it at a level, you know, that is junior. But the emphasis for us is that the message must come from the top, and therefore we want the leadership of the organization itself, that is our managers, to be actually the champions of this organizational culture and values. Cascading it to then our divisions. What then, I mean, we will then be looking for an example, I mean, would be people that have demonstrated in the past, in the work that we have already done, you know, passion for this work, I mean, that we have been doing on organizational culture and these values. We have teams, you know, that we have identified before, that we have worked with before around this issue of organizational culture, I mean, and these values. And these colleagues, they are extremely enthusiastic about this work. They want basically to continue, I mean, to work with us. We also have coaches, Mr. Mwema, that we had trained as an organization with the intention of supporting their colleagues to ensure that, I mean, when people are feeling a little bit under the weather and they need someone to talk to, you know, on issues that are affecting their work, they have a peer, you know, that they can talk to as well, you know, in order for them to be able to ameliorate, you know, whatever challenge that they are facing at that point in time. So we still have those coaches. They were trained by the commission. They are the staff members of the organization. I mean, they are lawyers. Some of them are economists, and others, I mean, are admin staff. But they have provided a very important role in actually assisting the organization to be the ear on the ground, you know, in understanding what are the pain points of staff, you know, that are that's happening, you know, amongst staff. These issues, for example, that I was alluding to, related to the issue of, I mean, a burnout, you know. So these systemic issues, we were able to detect them, you know, because of these coaches as well, you know, because we meet, I mean, every quarter with them. We assess basically the state of the organization from a well-being point of view, and what then are the issues that are emerging from within the organization. And then those issues, then I have then the responsibility of cascading them, I mean, to our EXCO, so that the necessary measures are taken to address those issues.
And your office has received or has handled a number of very tricky situations. And I know that in some cases, some of the cases have led to fatalities. Going forward, and in terms of the strategy that you want to implement, do you think that your office is well-resourced to deal with that? But secondly, what is the expectation from ordinary members of the commission like myself in order to assist the kind of valuable work that you are doing? What is it? What is your call to action to ordinary members in terms of what they must do to assist your office? But secondly, are you geared, given the challenges that you have faced or the challenges that employees have faced, are you geared to deal with the future?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. I mean, with regards to that, I mean, fortunately, I mean, for my office, I mean, we have been engaging with staff. So the staff of the commission understand clearly what we can and what we cannot do, what falls, I mean, within the scope of the office, and what falls then outside of the scope of the office. And therefore, because of that understanding, what I've been receiving were complaints that were relevant, that we were then able, to address. If I can go back, to this example of burnout, which emerged as a systemic issue within the organization. So what then we did is that we, as a consequence of that, then, provided training across all the divisions, within the organization on strategies, to mitigate burnout. And also what is the responsibility of the leadership in mitigating, in particular, burnout. This speaks now to the issue of workload, for an example. How do we allocate work? This also talks to then the issues of succession, within the organization, allocation and reallocation, what is called work breakdown structure in terms of the quantity of work that is allocated, per employee. How, for an example, do we manage situations, where an employee is off sick, for an example, from the office, how do we manage all of that? So, as a result, then, the complaints that we had handled, they were relevant. We were able then to handle them, satisfactorily. These complaints were coming from, various divisions, Mr. Gwam. And they relate, to various issues, like the issue of burnout that we were talking about, issues of related to, work or overload, this balance, between work and work-life balance, issues related to setting boundaries, for an example, there were issues related to the fact that people felt that ever since COVID, basically they work for 24 hours, in the sense that they have to be available, at any given time, in the course of the day, and in some instances, even after hours. So we addressed that issue again, at a leadership level, and we also, and then from our side, we trained then staff, on how to say no in balancing, in striking that balance. However, there was also acknowledgement that because of the nature of the work of the organization, sometimes it is not practically possible, to maintain that 8 to 4:30 period. There are circumstances where, we will be required as an organization that we work even beyond that period. But the emphasis has been to make sure that we converse, there is a conversation, there is a discussion, and there is an agreement, and there is an understanding, such that no one feels in any way prejudiced or treated unfairly or overworked, as it were, within the organization. So to answer your second part of your question, going forward in terms of what we plan to do, from a strategy point of view. The issue then that we address in the main there, Mr. Ngama, is to make sure that our leadership, is on board. Our leadership supports, this work that we do, 110%. This is important for the very reason that I've alluded to before, of making sure that the messaging, of the connection between strategy and culture, comes from the top, As Peter Drucker, an economist, puts it very bluntly that, actually culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's the message that we need to, communicate, especially, to the leader of the organization, to make sure that they are able, to understand that we can be passionate as much as we want about the strategy of the organization and its implementation. However, if we do not address the issue of organizational culture, we will not be able to achieve our strategic objective. This is something that we want to communicate with them and make sure that they are on board. We also want, Mr. Ngama, to make sure that we we do some research work, around then the issue of the management, in terms of how do we want to manage as an organization. And then we want to document that. We want to launch that, so that everybody basically is on board, in terms of how, as an organization, do we want basically to manage, This is very important, Mr. Ngama, because, one of the challenges that we had, in the organization before, this was coming from previous surveys, was that, we have division-based cultures, we do not have a unified sort of like culture within the organization. And we want to basically, address that so that we have one unified culture, particularly in terms of how basically we want to manage people as an organization. That's very important. So we want to arrest that so that there is uniformity in terms of basically how we manage in the organization.
And then I think if we had time, but I don't think we should deal with it now, one day we must discuss the difference between management and leadership, because there's this distinction there. But talking about culture and strategy, to what extent the fact that people, since the advent of COVID, people are working from home, how has that interrupted the culture that was there? And what culture did that bring in? And secondly, what are your hopes with regard to the fact that now we are looking forward to all of us being in the office? How is that going to assist us in building one coherent cultural or organizational culture that everybody is able to relate to, probably like the days before COVID, where to a large extent we had a commission or competition commission culture. And I'm sure COVID as an interrupter did indeed interrupt that kind of familyhood that we had, because we were seeing each other virtually every day. So how is the advent of us now coming back to the office, opening of Block G, and how has the fact that we worked from home affected that organizational culture?
Interestingly, on the changes that have been brought up by COVID, you may recall, Mr. Ngama, that there was a survey again, that was done by the organization, when we were still, working from home under COVID, And one of the interesting outcomes, of that survey was the increased performance, across the board in the organization, whilst people are working from home. It was very, very interesting, in the sense that one of the reasons, for an example, that people alluded to the fact that the reason why they were performing so highly now when they are working from home was control. They had now total, complete control over their cases, which was very interesting, The other issue then was, on the downside, was that people felt isolated, though. There was a lot of people that felt lonely. It was extremely severe for those people that work in Gauteng alone, coming from the various provinces. So in that sense, that period was very difficult and challenging for them. As we now, contemplating, coming back to the office, I do know, Mr. Ngam, that there are anxieties within the organization, from some staff members about coming back to the office. There are staff members, for an example, that were employed, during COVID, and they have never had been in a space where they meet everyone, for an example, except their own teams, in their own divisions. However, we we do understand and appreciate, those anxieties. We have already established, a team as an organization. It's called an infrastructure team. What that team basically has done to prepare for that, was to solicit, the services of our in-house psychologists to assist, our colleagues, to manage that transition from working from home into the office. Given the nature of that report, those concerns are legitimate. Those anxieties are legitimate. And I suggested to the team that those anxieties must be managed, and the services of our in-house psychologists must be sourced such that people are given space, to communicate what their fears are, and what informs those fears, and how, in their view, they feel those fears basically can be managed. Because people differ within the organization, in terms of positions and all of that, and therefore it's very important for the organization not to be dismissive of those anxieties and concerns and fears, of coming back to the office. In my view, there must be those of our colleagues, that have those anxieties, must be given all the necessary support and not be condemned for having these anxieties for coming back to the office.
And some of those anxieties, though, may come back to what you mentioned earlier in terms of management, because now there's going to be interpersonal contact basically every day of the weekdays. And some of the pressures that disappeared during the time people were working from home are going to come back, because now, for example, if I'm harassing any of my colleagues, or if I have issues in terms of my management, that is going to manifest itself on a daily basis, whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's unnecessary and undue pressure in terms of the kind of work that has to be done. So therefore, that also calls upon on what you had raised earlier in terms of us as management refining the kind of interaction that we have with our teams and the kind of way we lead our teams, so that people also can be able to be comfortable in terms of how they need to do their work. In as much as there is also an obligation on all of us to make sure that as part of your values, we are part of the team, but also the culture of the team must also make it conducive for people to be able to feel at home when they are back in the office, isn't it?
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Ngoma. It is precisely because of that reason that we basically, plan to have a very serious leadership development intervention, as an organization, going forward. And that intervention is going to take the form of a peer learning, not your traditional sort of lecture sort of intervention, And that peer learning, comprises of very experienced, chief executives, in South Africa, that will sit down, and engage peer to peer, with our leaders, and addressing actually that very issue that you were raising, just the distinction between managing and leadership, because leadership always, Mr. Ngama, looks at the bigger picture, Management is operational, leadership is strategic, is visionary, So it's very, very important, therefore, to understand and appreciate that distinction. Because leadership enables you then, Mr. Ngoma, to look beyond your divisional, your sectorial interests. You tend to, when you are a leader, you look at the organizational, in total, in terms of what the pain points, but organizationally, leadership also then calls you then to look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture is then this organization 10 years from now, So we need to have, for an example, a motto, at that level, as leadership of the organization. For an example, asking, for example, a serious questions like, how do we want to leave this organization?
Our legacy.
Yes, your legacy, yes. What do we want our legacy to be, as the current leadership of the organization? Those questions, then they force you, to look at yourself, Mr. Ngwema, in the mirror, and ask yourself some serious question. What legacy then do you want to leave, after your tenure, after your period within the organization, And then in answering that question, when you then say, I want to leave the Competition Commission better than when I found it, you must then answer the question, how? That is then going to give you then the tools to make sure that you are then able then, Mr. Ngwema, to develop the necessary tools, the necessary strategies to make sure that indeed you are able to leave the organization, better than when you found it. That's what basically leadership talks to. It looks at the bigger picture, and that forces you to look at the organization holistically, and then once you do that, then Mr. Ngwema, you will then able to develop the necessary programs. One of the things, for an example, that we would like to, to introduce in the organization, is the 360-degree feedback, for leadership, because the 360-degree feedback enables you, Mr. Ngwema, to give feedback from your own peers. It also enables you to get feedback from your own subordinates in terms of how you lead them, how you manage them. How have you provided leadership? So that then provides you with a mirror, for you to look at, in terms of areas of improvement, as a manager, as a leader, And it's very important that a 360-degree assessment, Mr. Ngwema, is not something that is seen as judgmental. It's important that it's seen as something that is intended to enable us, even at leadership level, to learn. Because learning is a journey. It's impossible to learn, to know everything. If then you understand that learning is a journey and that nobody is perfect, it makes it then easier then, Mr. Ngwema, to learn from your peers, to learn from your subordinates, and then you are developing holistically, not only from a technical point of view, but you're also developing as a leader. And that development emanates from the feedback that you are receiving from your peers and from those that you are basically you are leading. And it's something that we want to introduce, Mr. Ngwema, and we hope that we will basically be able to succeed in the organization, because I think that it will be very helpful for all of us. I think it will be very helpful also for the organization. As a whole.
No, that certainly would be remarkable. I have run out of questions. I think we may have covered every corner of the aspects that you have to deal with regards to the values and culture. But is there anything that you think you need to look at, or we need to re-emphasize as we wrap up this conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Ngwema. I've had the privilege of learning, from other jurisdictions as well. I've also had the privilege, Mr. Ngwema, of attending training, that was provided by the Chinese, the Chinese academy. One has learned a lot, from that space. And going forward, from my side, Mr. Ngwema, I would like to see, at the commission where we entrenched, the cultural pillar of meritocracy, the pillar of pragmatism, and the pillar of honesty, as an organization, as part of our cultural pillars. What that means in our context, when it comes to meritocracy, I mean, it would mean that from a recruitment point of view, for an example, we are recruiting based solely on merit as an organization, When it comes to performance as well, merit-based, When it comes to pragmatism, I mean, for an example, pragmatism talks to flexibility, your ability to adapt, to changing circumstances, So the organization has demonstrated, that pragmatism before, in the core work of the organization. But that pragmatism, I think we also need to adopt it when it comes to then the values and the culture of the organization as well. We be pragmatic, And then when it comes to honesty, everything that we do, Mr. Mziwodumo, we do it with sincerity. We do it with honesty. What the question then we are answering, we are asking all the time, is this in the best interest of the organization or not? That's what should then inform, basically, our behavior and our decision making, If we sustain, we implement and sustain cultural pillars within the organization. In my view, going forward, we will actually be even better than we are at the present moment. But it's very important for the organization, to sustain its credibility, sustain its legitimacy, if we are to retain the position of being one of the best performing organizations in South Africa. Thank you.
Mzee, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm sure those values that you mentioned just now, you're going to file them somewhere so that when we revisit our values in 10 years or 5 years' time, we're able to look into those and see whether or not shouldn't they also form part of what makes us as members of the commission and this institution. Thank you very much, Mzee.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mr. Man.
Thanks.
Thank you.